So on the show today, we have Pam Kramer. Pam is president of ITP International, a non-profit organization that stewards ITP and the work of its founders, George Leonard and Michael Murphy. Pam is an ITP mastery teacher on the faculty of Esalen Institute. She trains ITP teachers and helps to form ITP groups and brings integral principles and practices to the workplace. She is also a performance consultant and executive coach with 30 years consulting experience for organizations and entrepreneurs in the San Francisco Bay Area. So Pam, it's wonderful to have you on the show today. I'm very excited about finding out much more about ITP, Integral Transformative Practice. So delighted to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here. I love talking about ITP.
Great. So let's start right at the beginning. I know that ITP stands for Integral Transformative Practice, but can you tell us more? What is this all about? Can you break down the different parts for us?
Sure. So Integral Transformative Practice, we often refer to it as ITP, is a program that was developed, as you mentioned, by George Leonard and Michael Murphy out of the spirit of Esalen Institute. And it is a practice that was developed to accelerate personal growth over time by using an integral approach. So we are engaged in cultivating body, mind, heart, and soul. And the integration is what seems to work and enliven people and help them transform their lives.
So it's really bringing together all the different parts of ourselves.
That's right. It's a perfect way to describe it, Allison, because the whole idea is, interweaving all of our parts and from there extending out into the world a more vital, balanced, and healthy human being. So that's the intent of the practice, to realize one's potential.
To realize one's potential. That sounds amazing. And particularly, I guess, in the world as it is today, when perhaps some of us are feeling a bit closed in and that perhaps we're struggling to realize our potential. A lot of us are locked indoors and finding things quite challenging at the moment. So this sounds like a wonderful practice to help us.
That's exactly right. And it can be done on one's own or with a friend or family member. And often we benefit by doing it in a community. We have ITP groups that are in different parts of the country and the world.
Great. So I'm really looking forward to finding out more, but I want to just take you back a step because I know that Esalen has been sort of described as the birthplace of ITP, but I'm conscious that perhaps some people don't really know what Esalen is. And I wondered if perhaps you could just take us back a step and tell us a little bit more about what Esalen's all about and what it brings to the world, because I know that you're very involved with that as well.
Absolutely. Esalen Institute was created by Michael Murphy and Richard Price, and it began, I believe, in 1962 in Big Sur, California. And the whole notion there was to create a retreat center where people could come from all parts of the world and explore their inner life and develop the concept of realizing one's potential. So there were many folks that came from different parts of the world, practitioners like Ida Rolf and Fritz Perls and Abraham Maslow and Aldous Huxley. All of these names may be familiar or not, and those were kind of the precursors to the human potential movement. So there they were at Esalen Institute with the idea of kind of breaking free out of the trappings of our cultural space at the time and really kind of surging ahead to develop a more realized human being. So that was the whole original notion, and kind of a place to interweave ideas and practices. The somatic movement actually had its roots there too. So out of that whole sort of landscape, cultural landscape that was created there, sprouted the seeds for this particular practice.
Okay. So how did ITP itself come into being? It sounds like this was a real hotbed of ideas and different cultures and all lots of things coming together. But what was actually I guess, the seed for ITP itself?
Very good question, Allison. George Leonard, who was the president of Esalen Institute for 20 years and a collaborator with Michael Murphy, decided that what happened for people who attended seminars at Esalen, that they break open and they would kind of realize some kind of inner drive or passion within them. And then they go back into their family lives and to their workplaces. And they found that that sort of spark of revelation diminished. So George and Michael decided it's time to create a practice to extend that and to create kind of a foundation for learning over one's lifetime. So it's not just a weekend or even a month retreat there at Esalen. It's more like, this is a practice you can do on a daily basis in your home and at work and in your daily life.
And I think that's one of the key.
1992, 93, sorry.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So they were really ahead of the game, because I've experienced that a lot myself, actually. You go away and you do what feels like a really transformative weekend or week, and you do come home and you're like, wow, that was amazing. And then a few weeks later, it's very easy to lose it, isn't it? You're not in that environment. It's not as easy. You're faced with real life again and all the challenges that we have in the everyday world, or just being with our families or our friends who haven't been on that amazing week or weekend retreat with us. So this sounds really powerful.
Yes, I think the culture or society we find ourselves in oftentimes sets sort of the mores for how we're to behave. And so when we have these openings that occur and we go back into that cultural space that says, no, do it this way, it's oftentimes just a natural human instinct to go back to our habitual patterns. And so in our practice, we have a number of ways to be able to navigate that. Okay. And to kind of develop a course for ourselves in our own lives that, with the supportive community, which is often very important, to stay that course and develop kind of a vision for our lives that may be different than what we learned from our families and from our wisdom traditions, etc.
And from all those expectations that are there, and like you mentioned community, actually, and I think that's a fascinating point. I'm obviously very involved with the embodiment community in the UK, and increasingly globally, I get to talk to people like you, which is amazing. But I certainly find that being involved in that community keeps the fire alight, helps me be consistent with my practice. And it sounds like the community side of it's really important as well.
Yeah, it's a way to reinforce and to also learn. And in a sense, you kind of have a little tribe that you're working together to cultivate kind of more of an awakening, more of a sense of who each of us is and wants to be, and then some tools and practices to kind of cultivate and keep that alive and growing and always learning.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's come back to you, actually. I'm also curious as to, where did your personal journey start? When did you first realize that the body is so important? I mean, it's not just about being stuck in our heads. What's your background?
Right. Well, as a child, I was one of those kind of tree climbers, and I used to ride my bike, and I'd love to run. And so my body was always a friend for me. And then when I was 19, I studied yoga. So this is going back way before yoga was very popular. And I continued with that practice for many years and trained as a yoga teacher in Los Angeles. This was going back into the early 70s, and continued with that practice up until the time in which I started becoming acquainted with more kinds of practices like Qigong and Tai Chi and so forth. Then I stumbled onto ITP in I think it was 1999. Okay. And a practice group had already been formed, and in the San Francisco Bay Area in Mill Valley, California. So I joined that in 2000. And that's been kind of my path ever since, along with many other traditions, because ITP is very welcoming, and it's not just about, it's not a cult, it's a practice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So there's not the dogma, you can only do ITP and nothing else.
correct. Yeah, the whole notion of dogma in ITP is actually set aside, because when it was developed, there were a lot of gurus that had particular points of view. And I think George Leonard, Michael Murphy said, you are your own authority. The truth and the wisdom lies within. So it was kind of like an antidote to that whole kind of cult movement, if you will. And that it's very welcoming and expansive. And so each person develops their own sense of what the practice means for them.
So it sounds like it's really through experimenting and discovering your own truth by doing the practice, rather than somebody sort of from on high saying, I know everything and you know nothing, and you just have to believe what I say. It sounds much more experiential and truthful to yourself, authentic to yourself.
That's exactly right. You got it. I'm glad to hear that, how you describe it. It's because what we're looking at is our inner life, as well as our outer expression, and to create some kind of coherence between the two. So we go inside and we look and we notice, what's our mind all about, and what's our physical body, and what's going on in our emotional self, as well as our own sense of our soul, or however we define it. And from that examination, we create our own methods and practices to be able to cultivate effectively a further expression of all our many parts, like we just discussed before.
So really bringing everything together in an authentic way. And I guess I'm curious, you mentioned that you were, the body was always your friend, and I don't think that's always the experience for people. Some people really feel that their body isn't their friend, or maybe they feel it's letting them down. Or I know I was always the kid at school that was picked last for the sports team. I wasn't very sporty, and so that it kind of makes you not want to get involved. I was always much more focused on, well, I'll be the academic one, not the sporty one, because that was where my natural inclination went. And I guess I'm curious, as perhaps some of the people that come to you, whether you see that and how maybe people grow and learn to become friends with their body more.
Thank you for that inquiry, because I'm thinking about classes at Allison Institute that I've taught over the years, and oftentimes people come and they want to engage with their body, because in our culture, the mind is really privileged. And it's a beautiful thing that we have this mind that has so much capacity. And the whole notion of connecting the mind and the body is essential in this practice. So along with the heart and our soul. So giving ourselves a chance to awaken even what the body feels like. Notice what those toes have to say, and developing kind of a relationship with one's body is primary to the practice. And I think it's also something that people seek and derive great pleasure, and sometimes challenges, because when the body says things like, oh, I'm tired, or a part hurts, we have to acknowledge that. And that's where the emotional component comes in, where we have some feelings around that. And then practices to negotiate and engage, so that those parts start to seem more integrated and friends with each other, if you will.
So if somebody feels they don't really have a relationship with their body, they're not able to feel perhaps certain parts of their body, or they find it very hard to feel different emotions, what can they do to help them get more in touch, to actually understand what's going on in their body more?
I love that question, because, if we've been cut off from our body, there's some armor that sometimes is there, and defenses have built up. So it's really hard to tap in. And so the willingness to just notice that that's true, and stay in that inquiry. And then perhaps to just notice, well, when I shake a hand, what does that feel like? And so more familiar kinds of interactions with the physical body sometimes can help people to realize, actually, I can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take that felt sense and you allow it to move up the arm, into the shoulder, and down the side of the body, over time, it seems like there's more of a relaxation that occurs. And I think that's an important part of being receptive to the physical body, is to learn practices of relaxation. And in our community, we talk about it a lot, that the power of relaxation. Mm-hmm. Because George Leonard was a 5th degree black belt in Aikido, and he had a dojo for 30 years. Wow. Very popular around the world.
He's a busy man.
Yes. So we have the influence of Aikido in our practice a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it gives us kind of a felt sense that this physical body has messages, information for our emotional self, and it holds wisdom that often we don't think about in our everyday life. So we awaken to all of that over time, and that's why it's a practice. And you start wherever you are. So it's not about, excelling or perfecting. It's more about allowing. And with that allowing and that relaxation, some things start to, kind of present themselves. And then we can respond and say, oh, I felt that. Maybe I can feel something else too at a later time.
So it sounds like you could start at a very simple level, literally just noticing what touch feels like, say, on your hand or something, at the very simplest of levels, and then working your way over time deeper into that. And then when I do, if I stroke my hand, then what other impact does that have on my body? And very slowly and gently noticing the changes. Am I understanding correctly?
That's correct. That's correct. And with a partner. So a lot of our practices, Leonard Energy Training, developed by George Leonard, was a practice based on the principles of Aikido. So it's not, we're not falling, we're not taking somebody on and bringing them down, as a peaceful kind of resolution, because that's the whole intention of Aikido. But it's more using a practice partner to help us notice triggers. Mm-hmm. So even by somebody touching your shoulder with a firm pressure, you can notice what's going on. So that's another means for awakening the body to its wisdom, and also the patterns that rest inside of us. So it's a big learning exercise. Okay. And we take it a step at a time. And so there's no pace that's right. It's only the pace that's right for you.
That's right for you. And what about if people are coming with perhaps trauma in their history? How does that get integrated or managed in this kind of practice?
Yeah, and I think most of us have some semblance of trauma that rests in the body. And so through these kind of gentle exercises that welcome a noticing, mm-hmm. we can start to piece together also by looking at our narrative, perhaps where they came from. Because we look at our life, we do a review of our life on an ongoing basis, so we can kind of see the seeds of when that might have been created. And we always recommend that we seek counsel for support, and that this practice is not therapy, and it can be therapeutic. So through the practice over time, we can notice, gosh, I can see where that came from, and let me notice how I am right now in this moment. So you can kind of see the past and the present, what that can feel like, and maybe it's very different. So then then the mind can also kind of take in that there's a new storyline that wants to be created, a kind of a surging of growth that has a healing capacity and also a trajectory towards maybe something new that we can learn based on that trauma, that we can be helpful not only to ourselves but to others, which is another essential part of the practice. It's not just about I'm working on myself so I can be of greater service in the world. It's a both and.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so it sounds like there's an ability to, over time, to shift that narrative to, as you say, to notice this is how it was, and this is how I am now, and then maybe where would I like this narrative to go, or how can I change in relation to the narrative, or is it the narrative changing in relation to me?
Well, I think it's both in a sense, you know. It's kind of the idea that once we're aware, then we can honor and be compassionate with ourselves and notice what wants to arise next, which ties into the process of affirmations that we work with. You know, when you ask about integral transformative practice, so integral, I'll just step back for a moment. It's body, mind, heart, and soul. That's the integral, the cultivation of all of those many parts. Transformative, which is, where is it within myself that wants to grow and change in a positive kind of way? So that's where the transformation occurs. And then the practice is what supports that healthy growth and change. So if we go back to the whole notion of affirmations, those are statements in the present tense that aim for that kind of healthy change. So if a body part is injured or it has trauma that you're aware of, you can use your affirmation process to create a parallel reality with the present tense and aim towards a healthy transformation of that body part. So sometimes, you know, people can feel a tightness in their chest. And if there's an awareness there, then there can be more like, my chest is open, relaxed, and aware. So that kind of aiming towards that transformation, using that over and over again in a felt sense, what people find through this work is that former way of feeling and being starts to move into that transformation without denying that the original trauma occurred or healing needs to be done. And all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over time, but sometimes all of a sudden, and then we applaud, because when that happens, we go, yay, because people do say, momentarily, I just got it and it happened for me. But generally speaking, it's a practice. Then there's a new way to feel and be as a human being in the world.
So it sounds like really recognizing people's experience to date, really holding that, acknowledging it, and then thinking, what's the positive intention? Where would I like to go? And just slowly over time, allowing a possibility for that. And then maybe that possibility will arise.
Exactly, Allison. I love the way you frame. You know, ITP is a practice of possibility. It's another way to frame it. So we can see that we're more than meets the eye in this moment, that there's kind of a ongoing evolutionary impulse, just like the universe, you know, growing. We are part of that. And that ties into the worldview that as we grow and change, there's some kind of interplay with our growth and the world's advance. So, you know, and you don't have to accept that to be practicing ITP. And it does have a very hopeful worldview, which is what I love. And that's based in the work of Sri Aurobindo, who is Michael Murphy, the co-founder of Esalen Institute and ITP co-founder too. That was his original teacher teaching in India in the early 50s.
I really love it, the hopeful world view, because if we don't have hope,
world.
what have we got, you know? So having
Right.
that notion that things can change, that we have agency, I think is really important.
Yes.
Pam, can we get really, I would like to get really concrete now in terms of just, firstly, understand, but if I know that you run groups, and if people were to come along to a class or to want to experience this for themselves, in a more concrete way, what would that be like? What is it like? We've mentioned the heart, the soul, the body, but in concrete terms, what are some examples of practices? Can you sort of talk to us and then maybe share something with us that we can experience for ourselves? Would be lovely.
Sure. So we have all kinds of trainings, you know, because I mentioned, Allison, the body, the mind, the heart, the soul. We often will kind of delve more deeply into the essence of that and how that's alive in each of us and kind of connect the parts. Mm-hmm. And ITP has kind of a structure of commitments, and these are commitments to oneself. So it's not like the 10 Commandments or anything. And ITP is spiritual, not religious. So I'll just qualify that. And so with these commitments, it's commitment for physical kinds of activities, for staying current, which is an emotional practice, for noticing feelings and expressing them skillfully, seeking counsel when needed, practices for mindful eating, practices for expressing ourselves as servants in the world, to be of service. Mm-hmm. So and the affirmations, which I mentioned. So we go through those 9 commitments and give people sort of an awareness of them, and kind of they can do assessment of where am I in terms of being my own authority up against where I'd like to be, so that you can start to develop some awareness of the growth that you're seeking based on those commitments. So we use those, and we use visioning, which is tied in with looking at our lives and where are we now and where do we want to be, and doing kind of a life review of sorts. So I think that really plants the seeds for personal reflection, and then that natural desire, we believe, for all of us to grow, just like flowers and plants. They come up and they seek the sun and the light, and we're the same. So we use practices to kind of help nurture that process along. And we work with the body a lot. So we won't sit and talk for too long. We'll get up and we'll practice, and we'll do physical kinds of things, practices that awaken ourselves, even using the voice.
Can you give some examples of what's, sure. I don't know if you can describe it, but some of maybe obviously this is the Embodiment podcast. I'd love to hear more about some of these body-based practices. What sort of things would help to awaken people if people want to try something?
Okay, so I'll share some ideas, and then maybe we'll do a practice.
Perfect.
How's that?
That would be great. That would be great.
So the ITP kata is kata means form in Japanese. So back to George Leonard with the Aikido. Mm-hmm. He developed a series of movements. So it's 45 minutes, and it's kind of like a handy practice where you move the body in gentle kinds of ways, but very thoughtful. So it was really developed using research and researchers that helped him assemble this particular kata. So we're all very fond of it, although some people, they're not, they have other practices, but that's okay too. Yeah. So we invite them in. So it's 45 minutes, and there's movement, a lot of movement, strength training moves, Some yoga was integrated into this practice. So we use different elements of that, kata, you know, to enliven. And some of them are very calming. Mm-hmm. Along with the physical part, we move into what we call transformational imaging. So we start that process of working with our affirmations. Once we're relaxed from the kata, the movements, and we have a relaxation series, we go into envisioning ourselves in this future state that we are affirming. And then we go into a period of meditation. So that's a 45-minute practice that many of us do several times a week and love it. Yeah. So it's a regular practice. And I know with many of the practitioners in your circle, they have different katas that they do.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I'd not heard of the term until I got into the embodiment world myself. And then suddenly it's like, wow, and I love the sense of ritual that goes alongside a lot of these things. They feel very powerful.
Yes. And then balancing and centering, which is very fundamental with probably many of your fellow practitioners as well. So we do a lot of that just to notice. And George Leonard talks about a centered body leads to a centered life. Mm-hmm. And that's what we are affirming, a more balanced approach to our daily lives. So we will get out of balance often, and then we bring ourselves back in using the practice of balancing and centering. And the practice I want to share with you is called GRACE. It's an acronym. And so we can practice that now if you'd like.
I would love that. Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so back to balancing and centering. If you don't mind, I will stand up and offer this. Is that acceptable to you?
That's absolutely fine, yes.
Okay, let's see if I can be seen on the screen. It actually doesn't matter because the voice is the main thing that carries this one. And it can be done seated as well. Okay. So I'm gonna stand up and push my screen back a little bit here. You can see a little bit of my body.
And I will try and follow. I'm gonna stay seated, but I will try and follow.
Okay, very good. Okay, I'm just standing here. And so, for starters, I'll just introduce the idea of balancing and centering here. And now what I do have are my feet about hip distance apart, and stance is very important too in this practice. So first we scan our body, and whoever's listening now, if you're standing or seated, you can just take a moment and take a breath. And on the exhalation, just begin to scan the body, just being aware, moving from, if you'd like, the head down through the shoulders and through the trunk and the spine and the hips, the legs, into the soles of the feet. And the eyes are soft and relaxed. We work with soft eyes a lot. So feeling your feet firmly planted, you can notice that below your toes in the center of the soles of your feet, there's what we'll refer to as a bubbling spring. It's a accessing kind of energy that moves deep at the core of the earth and then just bubbles up so that you can be aware of that bubbling spring at the soles of your feet. And then just to notice your alignment, the arms alongside the body. Notice your chin and your head, and see if all those parts can befriend each other, moving from the soles of the feet to the hips, and the shoulders and the chin. And then the eyes again, soft and relaxed. So feeling balanced here. And taking your attention to 2 fingers below the belly button and the center of the body mass, a hara, the center. Hara in Japanese means center. And feeling that center at the midpoint. If you place your front hand, one hand in front and the back hand, the other hand behind you, and drawing an imaginary line from the front hand to the back, at that midpoint is your center. And then drawing awareness there, we become balanced and centered and able, releasing those hands, to be energized in the world, ready, available, and open. And from this place here, we'll move to the practice of grace. We've already grounded, and I'll just take us there just briefly. Taking a breath now and feeling the connection of your feet to the earth, and drawing lines of energy from the soles of the feet down into the core of the earth, and resting awareness there. And then from the core of the earth, drawing awareness up through the layers, into the soles of the feet, up through the limbs, up through the spine, and out through the crown, and connecting your body with the heavens above, the cosmos, being aware that you're here on earth and connected to the far reaches of what's there, the great beyond. And then drawing the awareness from there back into your crown, down through the body, to the soles of your feet, and ground there. G for grounding. And R for relax. Take a breath. And on the exhalation, allow relaxation to permeate your entire being, your body, your mind, your heart, and your soul. And noticing any areas where there may be a tightness, and taking your attention there to bring relaxation in. R for relax, and then A for aware. Becoming aware of your stance and position on earth, aware of your feelings in this moment, aware of the energy around you, above, below, all sides, aware of the temperature in the room and the clothes against your body, and aware that you can be aware. And then take that awareness to your center, and you can pat your center, again, 2 fingers below the belly button. And notice the seat of intuition, and ask yourself, am I willing to bring my best and highest power into the world for positive change and transformation? C for center. And then E for energize. And you can open up your arms into what we call a scanning position. And the fingers move upward toward the ceiling, and you can just feel around you, all around energy, and the eyes are soft and relaxed and receptive. And now we're awakened to the possibility of our energy extending far beyond our physical body. And we bring it into the world through grace. Ground, relax, aware, centered, and energized. Take a moment of reflection to see how you're feeling. There's no judgment on how you're feeling, just a reflection to connect with your experience. It is your own experience. Thank you.
Thank you. That was quite extraordinary, actually, Pam.
What are you noticing, Allison?
Well, what I was noticing, firstly, even staying seated, and I can see how it would work standing as well, obviously, because you'd be able to stack your body more. But even seated, I felt like my body came into alignment much more than it had been. Suddenly everything felt connected, as opposed to, obviously, whilst I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm quite focused on the questions and what we're thinking about and the discussion, not so much maybe my body as perhaps I should be. So you've brought me right back into my body, which is always good. And then everything kind of felt much more open. And when you were talking about the energy, I could literally feel like the yeah, the energy moving around my body in a way that I'd become a little bit disconnected with today, my rushing around doing all the things I've been doing today. So that's absolutely amazing, and just feeling much more open, and as you say, just ready to go, okay, how can I help? What can I do? What's next? It's a really beautiful practice. Thank you for sharing it. I really enjoyed that.
So welcome. And it's very portable.
Yes.
You can do it at the grocery store.
Absolutely.
You could do it when you're in your car at the stoplight, and just to reconnect. And that's the kind of practices we do continually through the day.
And that's what we need, isn't it? Is to have practices that we can do anywhere, not something. It's great to have a practice where you're like, well, I'm going to go to the dojo and I'm going to do whatever it is I'm going to do. But actually also to have things that I can use during the day, because we can't, you know, we're living our lives. We can't realistically be in the dojo all of the time. We have to be out there in the world, and things happen. So having ways of coming back to ourselves, I think, are really important. And that was lovely. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you enjoyed it and that you feel enlivened.
I do, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I wasn't feeling sleepy because I was enjoying our conversation, but there's definitely been a shift in my energy. Oh, that was great.
And that's something we recommend a lot, that we shift our energy so that we can tune into kind of a more aliveness, and then using meditative practices for calming.
Yes.
And sometimes just grace itself is energizing and calming at the same time.
There's that real sense of balance between the two.
Yes.
That real sense of balance, which is really important. We need both, and it's easy to get stuck in one or the other. I'm curious, Pam, because a lot of the things we've been talking about are long-term practices. These are practices that you're doing on a regular basis, several times a day, several times a week, for many years. Is my belief that this is what you're recommending, and that's where the shifts will come. But all I seem to read about these days, I was having a conversation with another colleague recently about life hacking and biohacking, and everywhere you see, people seem to be saying, oh, you can hack this and hack that. And I was like, I don't want to hack my life. I want to live it and experience it. But I guess I'm wondering, firstly, why you think the long-term practice is a better way to do things than hacking things. And also, in a world where everyone's increasingly got shorter attention spans, what impact is that having on people trying to practice ITP?
I think it has a great impact. And we're seeing the signs of discontent, a lack of feeling integrated and connected. And so those quick fixes oftentimes are not sustaining. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of it's a philosophy of how to live one's life.
Yes.
And so there are going to be times where we're going to need to sprint. So we need sort of that ability to shift and pivot. And this practice allows for that. So that means there are going to be times we're going to have to work fast, and we sometimes, we feel we multitask, and that's not something we recommend too often, but that happens. So there we are in that state, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then you can notice it and say, oh, I have options, because ITP is a practice about options. So we believe that that the more options people have and feel that they have perceived options, the greater their sense of well-being. And certainly it opens up the mind to an array of different choices that are going to be most satisfying. Mm-hmm. So if we're working too fast and we're imagining that this is going to get the job done really fast, sometimes that it's like a staccato energy. It's useful sometimes just to kind of get ourselves awake and, moving, and it's not sustainable. So we can get really tired, more tired. So what I've found from this practice is I've got more energy. The older I get, the more energy I feel I have. It should be going the
That's a
other way, right,
bonus.
Allison?
That's absolute bonus.
Yeah. Yes. So those are the kind of cultural conditions that we find ourselves, like I mentioned in the early 60s. It's like cultural conditions about how you're to conform.
Yes.
And show up in the world, and how important success is, and making money, and all of that sort of thing. And in our current cultural space, it's got a different kind of flavor, where things, because of technology, we're moving really fast. And it's all an experiment, because we'll see what the next iteration of all of this is. But in the meanwhile, we want a through line. We want to be able to sustain and actually use our capacities, grow our capacities, not diminish them. I don't know if I answered your question squarely, but those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think a follow on from that question would be, from your experience. I'm imagining, in having been doing this for quite some time, you've had times when it's been perhaps tough to maintain, you found it challenging. Can you share with us any examples around that, and what helped you to overcome it or to keep going? Is there anything like that you've experienced?
Sure. Thank you for that. We talk about the practice that the practice is however you define it. And so you're the one that is kind of directing traffic, so to speak. So there can be times when your energy is not available to do physical practices. And you're engaging with others. So that's a practice of how present am I to you and to myself at the same time. So because it's a full-on orientated kind of practice, body, mind, heart, and soul, you can kind of pick and choose. And sometimes you just want to say no to all of it. Sometimes we would just crawl under those covers and say no to the world. And then we give ourselves permission. Okay. And then we say, okay, maybe I say, really, it's me. Okay, now I'm going to tippy toe out. And where am I naturally drawn? So in this day, it may be to take a walk. And then the walk ends up vitalizing me to the point where I'm ready to do my practice of the kata, or to meditate. So it's kind of like that. And some people say, I haven't done the kata for a month, and all of a sudden I'm back in it and I love it. So it's like, have at it, have at your life on your own terms. And that this practice is always there waiting. And when you're ready, your energy will direct you and to reconnect in a way that may be even more satisfying because you took a break.
So it sounds like it's allowing you to really listen to what your body is telling you, what your heart, what your soul is telling you need in the moment. And then to actually be very self-compassionate. I don't have to force myself to do the kata every day. If for some reason I'm unwell and my body is just saying, actually, this isn't what I need. What I need is to rest, or to do something different, to spend more time meditating, perhaps, whatever it is. So it sounds very flexible, and that there's a possibility of a lot of self-compassion there.
Absolutely. What came to mind as you were speaking there too has to do with, we're always practicing something. We might be practicing resting, or practicing, kind of tuning out. And so as long as you can notice that, oh, hey, that's where I'm at, and that's what I'm doing. And then I may decide to practice my painting, or my piano, or my dance moves. And before you know it, you're kind of back in the flow of engagement with life. And so it's like that, just finding the flow and your own rhythm. And using these principles, there's a lot to draw from, and make it work for you, each person.
So, and again, what I'm hearing from you, Pam, is that it's actually about bringing conscious awareness to what you're doing. Whatever it may be, can be a practice. Anything can be a practice, but the key is bringing that conscious awareness to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Conscious awareness. And to notice when you've drifted, like in meditation. You know, you can kind of go, oh, I'm in the thought stream over there. And then when you do, you say, oh, there's where I am. Interesting, duly noted. Maybe there was something important that was going on in that. So we'll tag it. And then gently bring the mind back into the breath or whatever your mantra is, and to complete that practice. That's an idea, you know, and it may not work. So it's always an experiment. I think our lives are experiments.
I love that idea. I talk to my clients about that a lot. I'm like, let's just play, let's just experiment. I don't know how this is going to work. Let's just try it and see what happens. And that's usually when the magic happens. I find that something surprising comes up that maybe neither of us were expecting. So
the practice of play is so much infused in ITP. So if we're not having fun in our lives, then there's a big question mark that what's preventing that from happening.
Yes.
And is that your choice? You know, so, and I have a big need for a lot of good time, you know, and just like this is a good time for me.
Absolutely.
You know,
It's fun.
You know, fun. It's just fun, you know, connecting and being with a new friend, you know, so.
100%. And I just want to take you back. We're coming fairly close to the end of our time. We've got a bit of time left, but I wanted to take you back to something you mentioned a couple of times at the beginning, Pam, which was about being in service.
Mm-hmm.
And just to get your thoughts on how ITP, or just generally from your own perspective, the importance of being in service to the world, to the environment, to society. Can you just share with us your thoughts around that, please?
Absolutely. The book, The Life We Are Given, George Leonard and Michael Murphy wrote this particular book, and it has the kind of all the features of the practice. However, after our practice community got going, George Leonard and Michael Murphy wrote their book, and they went off to their other kinds of endeavors, and there was a practice group that formed, and from that came what we call the ninth commitment, which has to do with service and being helpful in the world. And that is a personal choice, how we decide to be of service. Walking somebody across the street who needs support, investing time and energy into a project in the community that needs our attention. So again, that I am my own authority prevails when it relates to service. We believe that personal transformation and social change are linked together, so that when each of us are engaged and alive in our expression of our soul's purpose, that has an impact on the world. It has an impact and a ripple effect amongst our family members and our community. When I'm more alive, I have more to offer. And from there's a natural kind of wellspring of energy that is wants to be expressed in the world. So it's not about going into one's personal cave. We do that plenty, but it's also bringing that expression out into the world in the manner that we choose, that is in alignment with our values and our personal interests. Yeah. And that's where that life review is really important, to notice what's inside that really matters, that makes you unique. Because we're unique and we're connected at the same time, you know. We're a collective on this planet. What a blessing. And each of us has our own special contributions. And they change over time too. So that creates kind of some liveliness too, to notice what's my next project. And we have a program called Integral Leadership where we focus on this a lot. It's a 6-month program, and each person has a project to bring their gifts into the world And it may be to work on themselves because that's what's most important, but it may be something in the community that is connected to one's highest values.
That sounds amazing. And I guess following, I don't know if it's linked to that, but I know you've done a lot of work in the corporate world, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've brought ITP to the corporate world, what kind of response you've had, if people are open to it, what kind of changes perhaps you've seen.
Yes, well, you know, years ago I worked in the insurance industry, and so this was, I would say, pretty novel to bring some of these practices in there. But what I find is when people are sitting at their desks for a really long period of time, and this is before COVID, of course, because we're still sheltered in place here.
Yes.
So what I found is that people want to get up and they move, and then they have more energy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd always bring some Leonard energy practices into those circles. And I worked with a team of leaders in a retirement facility. They were young leaders, and so this was a 2-year project. And each member of that group, they worked in groups of 8 and as little small teams to support each other. And they worked on their own affirmations and their own personal growth. So we kind of amended our materials so that it kind of worked more favorably for the workplace.
Yes.
And made more sense. So very good results from that. And, you know, that my collaborator and I spoke at a couple of conferences and shared the work. So there's infinite possibilities. And we have a group in France now that's bringing ITP into the corporate world there. So it's like, it's got a lot of different possibilities. And I think people are much more receptive now than ever before for embodiment practices.
I would totally agree. My first job was also in the insurance industry, weirdly. So a little connection there. But I think the corporate world is changing, and I think people that we are seeing far more heart-led businesses coming through, people wanting to make a difference and being more willing to be, I guess, seen in all that we are, rather than just, I'm in my professional corporate persona. Actually, I'm going to be seen as all that I am. So perhaps that change is also helpful towards people being more embracing of things like embodiment or things like ITP.
I think it's a new day. So this is a great time to bring this kind of work out there. And I feel like we're swimming in the very same stream together, and the stream has become a big river now. Yes. And so, you know, let's just keep at it, because the world is waking up in a new way, and these practices are invaluable for people to feel that sense of hope, and also to connect with what's really true and alive in them. So what a blessing to be able to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Pam. So just, I guess, 2 more questions. Firstly, is where can people find you online if they want to find out more about ITP and the work that you're doing?
Sure, yes. We have a website, and it's www.itp-international.org. And we have a Facebook, page as well. And on that website, there's, countless articles from George Leonard, Michael Murphy, and other integral spokespeople. And then practice tips. And we have workshops. We have an online series that's starting in October. And it's called The Journey Practice, and it gives people a kind of a taste and a roadmap to get engaged with the practice, and many other offerings that we have. And we are being studied by Stanford University, so we've got a study going on, and people are going to be responding to a survey about their extraordinary experiences, because from ITP it seems like there's a springing forth of energy into being able to be more intuitive, to be able to be empathetic. So these kind of capacities are springing forth as well, and we honor that and welcome them.
That sounds amazing, absolutely amazing. And the Stanford study, I guess at some point there's going to be a paper, and presumably people will be able to access that, hopefully on your website. It sounds like great research they're doing.
Yes, they've done a little bit of a paper. I shouldn't say a little bit. It is a paper on the affirmation process, and we're getting ready to put it on our website. We also were studied by the Institute of Noetic Sciences, that's in Petaluma, California, and they studied us a number of years ago, and all of that material is on our website too.
Fantastic, great.
Yeah.
Well, that's
We're our own research.
Yeah.
Excuse me, we're our own research project, so it's a subjective experience. All of us know what's working, what's not for each of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then just, I don't know, Pam, if you have any last comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners, anything else that you want to just leave people with, or about your vision for the future, anything else?
Thank you so much for that. You know, what came to mind to me is this whole idea of balanced, vital, and healthy, kind of as a signature, you know, for all of us to notice how we resonate with those kind of concepts, and then how they're integrated into our lives.
Yes.
Because vitality, I think, is extremely important, and that ties also in, Allison, to what we were talking about, our cultural space, diminishing that vitality or fragmenting it. So I'll just encourage everyone to notice, and to practice in ways that really resonate deeply within, and to give ourselves permission to be compassionate and forgiving of ourselves and of others, and to continue to seek where life wants to take us. So to be in alignment with that kind of inner guidance.
Perfect. Sounds a surrendering and an allowing of where life wants to take us.
Yes.
Perfect. Pam, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like we could talk for a lot longer, but it's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much for sharing all of this with us.
My pleasure. Many blessings. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Okay, lots of love.